I'm Dan Drake. This is Front Up on Geno TV and Channel 99. Our guest today is JoeAguiar3, President of the Board of the Center of Elder Affairs, among other things. You do a lot of other stuff too,
right,
but that's what you're here to talk about today. Well, tell us a little bit about what the Center for Elder Affairs is and what it does.
Well, the Center for Elder Affairs is really kind of the booster group for the Council on Aging. Essentially, they have to, by law, come up with programs and ideas and so forth. And then when they're not necessarily funded by the town or by grants, they ask for us permission to fund them, and we tend to do it. I guess the best example of that would be the Elder Expo, which we've kind of financed for 10 years. So that's essentially what our role is. I think a lot of this is crossed over, though. We have a 21-member board, and as a result, you get a great number of ideas, different ideas. So sometimes we're looking at programs as well, but essentially we have two roles: to finance their programs, and the other is to maintain the Salt Marsh building, which we own. Corporation owns.
The corporation, the town owns the land, the corporation owns the building.
Board, right.
Who operates the Salt Marsh Center?
The Salt Marsh Center is operated in terms of personnel by the town. They have two people, a secretary and a program director, who essentially is responsible for scheduling, adding programs, getting grants through the town, which can be used to fund some of the programs. So they pretty much do that. In terms of the maintenance, minor maintenance, some repairs, then it's our responsibility exclusively. I think the way it reads in the bylaws that we're responsible for the external and internal.
That pretty much covers it.
Covers it all.
So you just commissioned, or I don't know whether it was you or the council or combination.
The Center for Elder Affairs, primarily through the efforts of Julie Fitzgerald, and she deserves all the credit for it.
Just commissioned a study
Correct.
On elder needs in the community.
Correct.
Paid for by?
It was paid for by a grant from Remain and the Community Foundation.
And what was the study designed to do?
Well, it was designed to really see if there were two things. One, if there need to be needs that were not addressed by either of the board or any other board for that matter, and also whether there would be a necessity to expand or renovate or basically sell the Salt Marsh Center itself. But primarily it was based on the needs of the adults, senior adults at this present time. I think there's a great misconception, and I think you would appreciate this as I do, that seniors have a certain characteristic which is really non-existent. I mean, we have many seniors who volunteer.
The hair changes color, but
that's about
not
it.
Different. And some of us, it doesn't even do that.
That's true. We have many people who work part-time or full-time. We have others who are volunteers, so they're pretty active. And I think that's been a change over when that Salt Marsh actually began its activities. And I think it's important.
How long has it been?
Golly, it's before my time, and I came here in 1999. But it's been I think probably mid-'80s where it really hit its peak.
So what did the study tell you? Tell us.
Well, I think the obvious thing is it wants us to address what the needs of the seniors are going to be in the future. According to the study, 25% of the town's population in 2030 will be seniors.
Namely over 65.
Correctly. And essentially, in terms of the Salt Marsh Center, the preponderance of use is by people who are in their 70s to their 90s. That's pretty much how it is. Although the law and the policies require that anyone over 60 can use the center as well. And I think that's one of the goals. I think we have both a short-term and a long-term goal. The short-term goal is to get people in. And of course, when we have them in, what are we going to offer? And then, of course, the long-term goal is really what is the future of the actual building itself. Those are two primary sources.
So, what did the survey? You did a survey of the community.
Correct.
What did that survey tell you in terms of what people want, what they think they want, at least?
Yeah. Basically, we were surprised somewhat by the survey. Many of the things related to items that I don't think I had at least anticipated. Much of it was transportation, how they get there. I guess one of the questions in the survey was, how do people get to the Salt Marsh Center? And the answer seemed to be by bicycle or by walking. And I don't, that's what the survey said, but I just haven't seen that. But essentially, knowing that we were going to have full-time transportation and so forth, that's a program we want to promote. The parking lot is very, very, very small.
Right.
And the programs, particularly if you're getting into the fitness ones and bridge and bingo and things like that, parking lot is just full. And I think we lose some people who drive by, see that the parking lot is full. And
there's no place else around there to park.
No, I mean, you just park on Washington Street or you go home.
Right.
So that's I think.
How many people do you get for some of these programs?
The programs which fill the most, believe it or not, are the programs such as aerobic exercise, bridge, Mexican train, mahjong. Those are highly attended.
Mexican train is dominoes, isn't it?
It's correct. Correct form of dominoes. So you get large crowds for that. As a matter of fact, of all the programs, because we have a rule that anyone under 60 can join the group if there's space. Those rarely have no space for anyone under 60. Other programs, legal programs, programs like from the Homestead or Academy Hill relative to alternate senior housing, they get a decent crowd, but not certainly overwhelming.
What I think you're saying is the recreational programs get well attended. The informational programs less.
Somewhat, yeah.
Less
I mean, they are attended and they are very, very valuable, but in terms of the contrast between the two, it's really not even close. I mean, you're talking of classes of 20, 25 for fitness, and maybe 10 or 15 at most for other programs.
So where should we be going from here?
Well, I think what has to happen is I think we have to really look at collaboration between the agencies. People, I don't think, fully understand that there are 3 agencies involved with seniors here. The Elder Services of Cape Cod and the Islands, they have a local office at Landmark House. They're responsible basically for 2 programs, the Meals on Wheels, or home delivered meals, and Congregate. Then our agency,
Congregate?
It's people come to the Salt Marsh Center to eat lunch. Then you have, of course, the Nantucket Center for Elder Affairs, which is our organization, and then the Council on Aging, who are appointed by the selectmen. And I think
they do their own programming?
Yeah, they essentially are responsible for developing the programs that we're using. And I tell you, I'm real pleased because I think we need collaboration. And I think instead of waiting around, there are things that we can do right now. They have come up with some ideas such as memory cafes for caregivers and people suffering from dementia. They've also come up with an idea to have a village to village, which, as I understand it, is getting a list of volunteers who could be called if a senior has a need and so forth. And then also, they're also talking about, just programs involving transportation and so forth. So the collaboration is there. And my commitment as the president of our organization is if the Council on Aging comes up with a proposal and they vote on it to go ahead, then it's my obligation, not responsibility, but obligation, to put it on our agenda to fund it. With 21 votes and I only have 1 vote, who knows what's going to happen.
Where do you get your funding from?
We primarily get it from our own fundraising. We write grants, and as recently, last couple of years, have been very, very successful. The Center for Elder Affairs, probably 5 years ago, was really kind of going down and out. And with a new board of directors and the leadership of Nancy Swain, it kind of rejuvenated itself. So the 21 board members really are pretty energetic, pretty active.
How big a budget does it have?
Our budget, we have a lot of money, but it's basically in limited areas. Our budget for operation probably is about $15,000, but that's somewhat misleading because we have other funds.
You have program money.
Yeah, that's pretty much the program.
Pretty much restricted to a certain function.
Yeah, and the money from that comes from, we received a grant from Nantucket. I'm sorry, I don't want to give someone credit that doesn't have, but Great Point for their brunch program, and I guess it was the highest amount.
Great Point Real Estate?
No, the Great Point restaurant. It's not Great Point, Brand Point.
Brand Point, yeah. Brand Point Grill,
yeah, Brand Point Grill. And we received a significant amount of money that actually could keep our Elder Expo going for 3 or 4 years. And then other grants that we write. The Council on Aging can also write grants, but we must submit them because they can't raise funds as a town entity. So we have to submit the grant and help finance it as well. If there's, you have to make some contribution to get money back.
Right. So do you have a full-time grant writer, or do you cobble it together?
We pass it around. Yeah, Julie was pretty much responsible for the, not pretty much, very much responsible for the survey, and I wrote the grant for the grill. So I mean, we pass it around.
Well, you're lucky to have a group of dedicated people like that who will really do that kind of thing, because it's tough. Writing grant proposals is not easy. You made it. We were both at a meeting last week where you made the comment that if we're going to fish or cut bait with this thing, so to
Correct.
speak. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think that's part of one of the first goals that we have to address as the Center for Elder Affairs is to develop a strategic plan as to what the program is going to look like and how it's financed, but also what are we going to do in terms of the building. And I think we have to start looking in the direction of maybe there are other alternatives. I think the center is the only center not really operated by the town in the entire state of Massachusetts. So the Salt Marsh Center is kind of unique in that way. So that's one of the things to look at.
It's ironic that we have the only town-operated nursing home.
Yeah, exactly. That's really ironic. So the other dimension of that is whether it's going to become a town-owned facility, or essentially whether it's going to remain with us, and whether we, can renovate it or to get more programming in and so forth and so on. We're trying to do things by using technology, providing programs by video and so forth, such as that. But I think that in the long term has to be something we look at. A lot of people have put the concept out there or talked about a concept of, in the future, having a community center. And I think we have to make it clear that a community center is great as long as you realize it's for everyone. It's not a senior thing, a senior center. I mean, that we would only have part of the opportunity to use it, but it'd be for young adults and people at different times. So that's something that may be in the future. But as I say, our plan is to have a strategic plan to go in some direction and see which way we're going to go.
It's sort of viewed by, I know some people who go there almost as a club.
Correct.
And having different generations sharing the facility might take some of that away.
Yeah, that is a concern. I think I look at it as a community center in two ways. One, the actual facility, right, the structure, but the other is the idea, the concept. Just use an example. When someone builds, they want to add everything to it. Like, well, let's have a swimming pool. Well, we already have a community swimming pool, and I think it has to be looked in that way. That it's a facility that provides programs, but there are other areas that provide the programs that still can be, even if it's not connected directly, indirectly part of a community center. So the center is the building, and then everything around it, satellite-wise, that provides the programs that you need. So that's that's something that I think we're going to look at as an organization and see what happens.
There are people who have been talking about a community center here for a long time, and is it feasible? Is it not feasible? That's something that remains to be seen.
That's correct. Yeah.
Clearly, the weight of the community would have to be put behind it in some fashion. But what do you perceive as potentially the advantages of a community center from the standpoint of seniors?
Well, I think one of the things that would happen, we would have an opportunity, at least part of a day, to use have programming. And as I said, we have programming now from 8 in the morning to 4. We wouldn't even I don't think we would be even looking at that. We would be looking at a shorter period of time, but having more space and more rooms, we could provide more programs at the same time. Right now, if you have a program at the Salt Marsh Center, that's it. If you had a program where you had 4 or 5 rooms, you can have things running simultaneously with people of different interests. The other thing I see is the advantage of having, intergenerational mix. I think that's extremely important. I think everyone should have a role model, and I think there are role models out there for younger people and so forth.
Is there a program where seniors can go to the schools and tutor and
Yes,
help?
they do. Yeah, the schools have been very
Is that
open to that.
under your Center for Elder Affairs auspices, or is it?
No, generally, most of those are on their own. We also have the reverse. We have children coming from the middle school who come to the center and teach seniors technology, how to use a computer, how to do other things relative to technology. So there is an exchange. And I think that's the point I was making, that a center is a building, but it's also a concept that arms reach out.
It is a community center.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it would be places for people with disabilities to go to, like if you had a coffee, one of these memory cafes there, and people are in there. They're in there with other people, so that they're not like isolated and so forth and so on. So I think it's a great idea. But I think it'd have to be carefully planned. I caution, because any community center I've been familiar with, I caution against taking business away from anyone. So I mean, I don't think that it's something we have should be replicated, but it could be modified in some way to get other people involved. And I think that's a way to go, personally.
So the next step is for you all at the Center for Elder Affairs to develop your strategic plan?
Yes, it is. That's our very next step.
And
that's the short and the long term. The other item is to kind of encourage people like the Council on Aging with their ideas of memory cafes. I know there's people in the community already who are willing to host them. But then it just can't be we jump into it. It has to be carefully planned, have all the people who are going to be involved trained, and that applies to anything, whether we do memory cafes, whether we do
explain what a memory cafe is.
A memory cafe is basically an opportunity for caregivers and people who are suffering from dementia to come, and they offer programs for them that, quite honestly, sometimes bring them back to areas or times that they understand or remember, and it gives the caregiver a break. It also gives the person with dementia an opportunity to kind of talk to others and reflect on other things as well.
There's nothing like that here now.
To my knowledge, no. I mean, I think the Council on Aging came up with the idea as a result of a program done by the Alzheimer's Association. And I think it has a lot of merit. I mean, I personally support it. They're going to need some financing, and I think if that's something, I think our Center for Elder Affairs should consider it very, very seriously, as long as it's done appropriately, so there are no concerns with liability or anything such as that.
What about senior daycare, which is often for people with dementia, but who can't afford caregivers? Or
well, I don't think that study really said a lot about that, but I think personally that's critical. I think that's something.
The town had a program, so what, 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago?
Yeah, maybe a little longer. But I do think that's a necessity here. I think again, the concept of a community center, it has to address the needs of everyone, and if whether it's within or outside.
But would something like that be better affiliated with a facility that? Yeah,
definitely.
That cares
absolutely
for even physically.
Yes,
as part of
very
such
definitely. Absolutely, totally agree with that. Yeah, I think that would be great if that could happen. Yeah, I think the ones they had were successful, but I it's like anything else. You can offer a program, but if people don't use it, then what's the result?
I think that was one of the problems with the senior daycare, that there were only 2 or 3 people using it.
Yeah, as I remember it, that was the case. And then, of course, you start thinking, unfortunately, we end up putting a dollar amount on this. Well, it's costing this much for these few people, and then it tends to die. So.
That's right.
But, I would support that. I was surprised as a result of the meeting we were at that some people were thinking along those lines, and I don't really think the study, as I recall, and I've read it so many times, I think it mentioned it, but it didn't really promote that as an opportunity. Yeah.
Well, JoeAguiar3, thank you very much.
Thanks very much for having me, Dan. I appreciate it.
Good luck to you as this moves forward.
Okay.
And you do a great job. So.
Oh, thank you.